The sun was a blood-orange smear sinking behind the ridge, casting jagged shadows over the solar panels that now scarred my land. 27 of them, gleaming like smug invaders, stood in neat rows where my wildflowers used to sway. I could still smell the phantom sweetness of those blooms, now replaced by the sterile tang of metal and silicon. My boots crunched on the gravel path the HOA had bulldozed without my consent. Each step a pulse of rage in my chest. They'd called it community progress. I called it theft. My name's Caleb Holt, and this 5-acre plot in Willow Creek was my sanctuary until the Willow Creek Homeowners Association decided it was their playground. 3 months ago, I got a letter, crisp and official, stamped with their garish logo. Eminent domain, it said, as if those 2 words could justify ripping up my land for their eco-fantasy. They didn't ask. They didn't negotiate. They just showed up with contractors, permits, and Karen Whitaker, the HOA president, in her pressed blazer and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "It's for the greater good, Caleb," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension, like I was some backward hick who couldn't grasp the brilliance of her vision. Solar panels to power the gated community's clubhouse. Their streetlights, their precious fountains. My land, my sweat, my memories reduced to a footnote in their green agenda. I stood there now, staring at the panels, my breath hitching in the cold evening air. The hum of their inverters was a low, mocking drone, like a swarm of bees that had settled in my skull. I'd fought them in court, spent every dime I had on lawyers who promised justice but delivered nothing but shrugs. The HOA had the county in their pocket, and Karen she had a way of making people bend. Charm, threats, or just sheer persistence. She wielded them all like a maestro. But I wasn't bending. Not anymore. The first spark of my plan came that night, over a glass of bourbon that burned my throat as much as the injustice burned my soul. I was scrolling through county records, half drunk, when I stumbled across a public notice buried in fine print. The local power grid Willow Creek's entire electrical infrastructure was up for auction. A private company was unloading it, and the bids were open to anyone with enough cash and a grudge big enough to choke on. I had both. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Every hour was spent calling banks, liquidating assets, and pulling strings with an old friend who worked in utilities. The auction was a quiet affair, held in a stuffy municipal building that smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy. Karen was there, of course, representing the HOA, her manicured nails tapping impatiently on her tablet. She didn't even glance at me, just assumed I was there to grovel. When the gavel fell, and the grid was mine for $1, $2 million every cent I'd scraped together, her face froze. For the first time, that smug mask cracked. I didn't smile. I just signed the papers and walked out, the weight of her stare heavy on my back. Owning the grid wasn't enough. I needed to make them feel it. I spent weeks learning the system, poring over maps of substations and feeder lines, the kind of technical jargon that made my head spin. But I had help. Enter Marla, a wiry electrician with a smoker's rasp and a chip on her shoulder bigger than mine. She'd been fired by the HOA years ago for insubordination, which meant she'd told Karen to shove her petty rules. Marla showed up at my doorstep one evening, uninvited, her pickup truck rattling like it was held together by spite. "Heard you're taking on the dragon," she said, blowing a plume of cigarette smoke into the dusk. "Need a night?" Marla was the twist I didn't see coming. She knew the grid inside out, every wire, every switch. She taught me how to isolate circuits, how to reroute power, how to make the system bend to my will. We worked in secret, under the cover of night. The only sounds the clink of tools and the occasional hoot of an owl. Her hands moved with a precision that made me think of a surgeon. And her laugh, gruff, unguarded, became the only thing keeping me sane. "You're crazy, Holt," she'd say, shaking her head as we rewired a junction box. "But damn if I don't love a good fight." The HOA didn't notice at first. They were too busy patting themselves on the back at their monthly meeting, toasting their sustainable future with overpriced wine. Karen stood at the podium, her voice carrying over the manicured lawns, promising lower utility bills and a brighter tomorrow. I was there, in the back, nursing a coffee and a smirk. That night, I flipped the first switch. The clubhouse went dark. Just the clubhouse. No lights. No AC. No fountain gurgling in the courtyard. The next day, it was the streetlights on Magnolia Lane. Flicker. Flicker. Gone. By the third day, half the neighborhood was buzzing not with electricity, but with panic. Karen's inbox overflowed with complaints. I saw her storming across the community center parking lot, phone pressed to her ear, her heels clicking like gunfire. Fix it. She snapped at some poor technician who had no idea I'd locked them out of the grid's control system. I could have stopped there, let them sweat it out. But this wasn't about inconvenience. It was about justice. My land. My rules. I waited until the HOA's big 4th of July gala, their crown jewel event, where they'd parade their eco-credentials to the whole county. The solar panels were the centerpiece, hooked up to a massive digital display showing how much clean energy they were generating. Karen had invited the mayor, the press, even a local congressman. The air smelled of barbecue and privilege, and the sound of a live band drifted over the crowd. Marla and I were ready. We'd spent weeks rigging a bypass that would cut the panels off from the grid entirely, redirecting their output to a dummy Loada bank of resistors hidden in an old barn on my property. At 8:47 p.m., as Karen took the stage in a sequin dress that screamed, "Look at me," I gave Marla the nod. She flipped the switch. The display flickered. The numbers plummeted to 0. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by a murmur that grew into chaos. Karen's smile faltered, her eyes darting to the tech crew scrambling at the controls. "Technical difficulties," she said, her voice tight, but the crowd wasn't buying it. The band stopped playing, and the only sound was the hum of confusion and the distant crackle of my resistors burning off the solar energy in secret. Then I stepped forward, not onto the stage, but into the crowd, my voice calm but loud enough to carry. "Those panels, they're on my land. You stole it, and now I own the grid you're leeching off." The silence was deafening, broken only by the clink of a wine glass hitting the floor. Karen's face turned ashen. "You can't," she started, but I cut her off. "I did. Check the county records." The fallout was swift. The press ate it up. Headlines screaming about the HOA's overreach and my audacious revenge. Lawsuits flew. Karen tried to spin it, claiming I was sabotaging the community. But the evidence was ironclad. My deed, their illegal permits, my purchase of the grid. The county revoked the HOA's easements, and the panels were dismantled, leaving my land bare again, ready for wildflowers to reclaim. But it wasn't just about winning. It was about the cost. I'd burned through my savings, my retirement, everything but the clothes on my back. Late one night, as Marla and I sat on my porch, the air heavy with the scent of rain, she handed me a beer and sighed. "Worth it?" she asked, her voice soft but piercing. I looked out at the empty field, the stars cutting through the dark like tiny blades. My chest ached not just from the fight, but from the weight of what I'd lost to win it. "Yeah," I said finally, my voice cracking, "because they'll think twice before they mess with someone's home again." The next spring, the wildflowers came back, tentative at first, then in a riot of color that made my heart stutter. I walked the field with Marla, her hand brushing mine, the sound of bees humming a quiet hymn. Karen was gone, resigned in disgrace, her name a cautionary tale in Willow Creek. The HOA was quieter now, their meetings sparsely attended, their power clipped. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The land was mine again, and every bloom, every breeze, every sunrise was a reminder, You fight for what's yours, no matter the cost. Because some things home, dignity, justice are worth burning it all down for.